today's topic is setup best practice for the load master and automation. This was me when I started in Kemp, so many years ago, so way before COVID. So I'm Renard. I'm the pre-sales engineer for Loadmaster topics for the DACH and the Benelux region. We also have other colleagues covering UK, Ireland, France, and another colleague covering Nordics, Eastern, the Southern European region, and META. So I'm mainly for DACH and Benelux. I do cover if the other ones are out on vacation or sick. So the whole pre-sales team for Loadmaster in Europe is Dave Flax, covering mainly UK, Ireland, and France. Mike O'Brien, covering Nordics, Eastern, Southern Africa, and META, and me covering DACH and Benelux. So if one of the others is out sick or on vacation, we cover each other, but this is your main point of contact for your region if you have any technical concerns or questions. Now let's start. We have a good agenda. So set up best practice on Loadmaster. So first of all, of course, you need to know where you want to place the load balancer, how many network cards you want to set routing wise and so on. So there's a lot of thoughts behind. But once you have decided that and you deployed the load balancer, there's a few things you should set by best practice. So first of all, you should make sure the device has a host name, meaning by default, it sets the host name LM100. And if you have a syslog server that's collecting all the logs, with LM100, you have no idea who that is. So setting a host name for your machine is very good, because then you can identify who did send these logs, what are they for, and so on. So host name, one of the first best practice parts. The second thing is, which drives me personally crazy, if the time zone and the time server is not set, I go nuts, because when you do troubleshooting and there is no, the time is not right, I just go nuts. You do not find anything. You don't know which log correlate to each other. So that's one of the first things I do, is setting the right time zone and setting the time server. So that's very, very important. Then I mostly start with NICs. So if there's another interface, if I'm only one arm, so I only use one interface, or if I have a management interface and a production interface, or if I have multiple interfaces, I then do the NIC setup. So if needed, create bonds, put the IPs on those interfaces, maybe add a VLAN if that is in my network plan. Make sure the default gateway is on the right interface. You always start on ETH0, but if you have a hardware unit like an X15, very likely you want to do your production on the SFP modules. So that's interface ETH16 to ETH19. So that means you probably want to move your gateway from ETH0 up there. So these are things you start at the beginning. Also set the management interface, from what interface you allow SSH or 443. So these are quite important settings to do. Then, of course, uploading certificates, so you can work on 443 or other SSL services properly. So you add a certificate to the load balancer that you can then offload and re-encrypt the secure traffic. User management, so you properly want to have more than one user. So just having BAL as default is okay, but I would not recommend just having one user. Maybe you want to create other local users. Maybe you want to authenticate via LDAP or Radius, and you might want to use a user group, an LDAP user group, and everyone in that group should get access. And then you can set permissions to that group, and that allows you then with multiple users to log in and to make changes. So that's definitely something to think about. And then, of course, the web user interface configuration. So maybe the 10-minute timeout, idle timeout is not enough for you. I go always crazy with it. So I have it by default to 1800 set, 1800 seconds, that's half an hour. But these are settings you need to think as well. How many admins can work parallel on the user? Do you want them to be blocked after a certain amount of attempts logging in, and so on and so on. These are all web user interface configurations you should think about. Now, greatly said, where the hell can I now set the host name? So very easy, system configuration, network setup, and then you have host and DNS configuration, and right on the top, you can set the host name for that machine. So even if you have a pair, HA pair, you set a host name for each machine, right? Each machine has its own name. It's the same place where you can set your DNS servers, where you can set your search domain and so on. So it's the same location for that. Date and time, also system configuration, then system administration, and then date and time. You set your time zone. So in my sample, it's Europe and Berlin. Of course, I'm responsible for the DACH region, so that makes sense. And I set my domain controller as NTP server. Of course, I can set something else. As an NTP server, I can use an IP or a name. I personally like names. You can set more than one, space separated. You can add multiple ones. Of course, it's important that the load balancer can route there and gets an answer back. So if there's a firewall in between, that's something to look out for. Interface-wise, system configuration, network setup, you can select the interfaces and you can add IPs to it, or you can create the bond and you can add VLANs to that interface. So all of that happens in that setting. SSL certificates, you find them on certificate security, SSL certificates on the top right, then you can import a certificate. So it's always important to see what do you want your certificate to be used for. Should it be the load master administration, or will it be for services? So you need to all import them here, and also add, if you can, add the chain. So add the intermediates to make sure a client is also trusting your certificate. If it's your own certification center, you very likely want to add the chain as well. You can add wildcard certificates, but also with a single SAN name or multiple SAN names in there, that's also fine. Loadmaster administrative access, so that's for the web user interface. One thing I always see in customer setups, they forget to add an administrative gateway. So you start with ETH0, but that doesn't mean that your default gateway globally needs to stay there. So I always add the admin default gateway in here to make sure, even if I come from a client that's unknown to the load balancer, I get to my web interface and I get an answer to it. So that's the one thing. And the next thing is, by default, SSH access is allowed on all networks you have enabled. So I personally like to reduce that also to the management interface. So that's ETH0 here in my case. I make sure I only want SSH on my management. I don't want it from anywhere else. Great. Now, alternative gateway support. As I said, you start with ETH0. That's where your global gateway is set by default. And in order to change it to a different interface, you need to go to the miscellaneous options, network options, and then enable alternative gateway support. So that's the fourth row in that menu. You tick that box, and that enables a feature that is by default hidden. In your interface setting, you now have a checkbox, and you can now choose which interface or which VLAN should hold the global default gateway, and that will it will pop up, and you can then select. And as soon as you do, you get moved or redirected to the default gateway section, and then you need to select or set a gateway in the network on that interface. I just see a question regarding the certificates. I will show that once we see the live demo. Yes, we can do ACME protocols. So you can do, so the question is regarding SSL certificates. Please mention something about ACME certificates. So we can do Let's Encrypt or DigiCert certificates, so you can automate that process, of course. Then you don't need to upload them yourself, and they will be renewed automatically. I think I did a webinar in DACH before for that. We might do a webinar in English on that as well. but I will try to show that later on. Okay, getting back to the deck. So this is the gateway. Now, it's always good to understand how single arm configuration or two arm configuration works. These are definitely phrases that are in our support articles, and I just thought I'm gonna give you some detail on that. So single arm means, it does not mean that you have only one interface on the load balancer. It only means that you only use one interface for traffic that goes in and for the connection to the server. So one arm means my clients connect into the network, into the same network using the same network card that I also use from the load balancer to the server. So we are a reverse proxy. That means the client connection is terminated on the VIP address. And now the load balancer is opening a second connection to the server, asking the question, collecting the answer, and responding back to the client. So if all of this happens in the same network, then this is a one-arm configuration, single-arm configuration. Same internally, internal, and then I go to internal servers. So this is one-arm configuration. Two-arm configuration is if I connect to a service on the, here, for example, on the DMZ, and now the load balancer is connecting internally on a different interface to the server, collecting the answer and going back. Yeah. Same if my client is connecting to internal resources and then we use a different network card to go to the destination server. That's two-arm configuration. So on the load balancer, it is your choice. You could have parallel, you could have one service as a one arm and you could have another service as a two arm. So that's totally possible. But there will be a routing webinar as well happening. So the time won't allow us to go into too much detail today. Additional things, best practice you should consider is, of course, redundancy. Do I use a HA pair, so active-passive pair, or am I using the geo feature to do active-active combinations? Geo can be used for multiple sites, but it can also be used in one single site to use to have, for example, in one site, 2 data centers, and you want to connect them actively, then that's a geo topic. Also, if you want to scale up more throughput, you could, with HA, you have one active, one standby, so you only have the throughput of one machine. With geo active, you could technically use each machines to its full capacity, and you can join them together. So that's pretty nice. So geo is definitely something to consider. Also important, LDAP endpoints, if you want to use authentication with LDAP for the user access for the management. Syslog server to get your logs on one location all combined. Maybe even email logging if you want a certain log deepness or severity being sent by email. So I think it makes sense from error level onwards, meaning there's a server down or a failover or something like that, that you get an email as an administrator on this topic. SNMP, if you have something like that, if you have monitoring systems, you can, of course, join the load balancer into those monitoring systems so that you get also the insights on, on the status. And then depending on your environment, is there transparency needed? What routing is there in there? Are there firewalls in between? What interface should be used to route to certain destinations, and so on. And then, of course, security, pre-authentication, WAF, snort rules, certificates, and so on. So these are all topics that then follow as well. Yeah, best practice useful links. I mean, there is not really a document saying you have to do it in a certain way. These are what I just listed out to you is my experience for the last 6 years being in, nearly 7 years being here in Kemp. There's no document that forces you to do a certain thing, but these were the things that kind of popped up in the last 7 years, and I thought I'm gonna share them with you. Cool. So that was my best practice part. I will not do a demo right now on the best practice. I will combine that with the automation part, and I think that's those two topics. They have a very nice synergy. So I will do all of those settings that I just talked about through the automation way in a minute. So we combine kind of both topics together in the demo. That brings me to the second topic, automatization. Now, the load balancer has multiple ways to automate. So we have a very good RESTful API. You can use the normal RESTful API or API version 2, meaning you use JSON tokens and so on. So that's definitely nicely there. We have pretty good documentation on that and examples as well. So that's working pretty well. There is a Java add-on, so you can install that, and then our APIs are converted to Java language, so that works. We also have a module for PowerShell, so you can run that on your domain controller or wherever you want, and then you can create your PowerShell scripts to automate stuff on the load balancer. Of course, we have GitHubs for that as well. There's a Python module if you want to use Python with a load balancer as well, to use Python language, and that was translated to our LoadMaster APIs. And there's also GitHubs on automation using Terraform. And then for the two clouds, AWS and Azure, there's also GitHubs on how to automate the load balancer there, deployment-wise and setup-wise. Now let's drill a bit deeper. So for the RESTful API, everything you can do in the web user interface that we have, you can also do by API call. So as I already mentioned, API, the normal API and API version 2, which is JSON format, is both supported. So how does it look? In normal API call would be something like that, HTTPS load balancer, if you don't have any other port than 443 set. Access, and then you can do set and get codes for some parameters. You also have codes like add VS to create a new virtual service, or add RS, add a real server to a service, or modify mod VS, modify a service. So there are multiple commands. With access/list API, you can get a list of all the commands that are being possible to be set. If you don't use a certificate or a specific user built in your request, you can add the user :password at LoadMaster right here in the beginning, but I will show you that in a minute. With JSON format, it's not a get, it's a post, and the way that works is HTTPS LoadMaster access v2, and then in the post header you send the JSON format, you then have your authentication, so API key, for example, and then you have the command. So for example, here you want to create a ping on IPv6, and then the address for the IPv6. That's just a sample. So that would be the view on the JSON format API. Very important, if you don't license and activate the LoadMaster using a script like PowerShell, Python, or API, then you need to enable the API interface first. So if you run a script enabling everything, this checkbox is already enabled. But if you license the load balancer by the web GUI, or you have done it already, this checkbox by default is disabled. So in order to run APIs, you need to make sure that this checkbox is ticked, and then the load balancer will answer on API calls. So that's important. The same applies to PowerShell. If you haven't used PowerShell yet and this is not checked, you will never get a command through. So that needs to be enabled in order for working with automation. And for that topic, I do have some links. So I gave you, I collected a GitHub link for you. Also the PowerShell API support article, the Python blog, we have to use that. And there are some other support articles about the RESTful API in the programmer guide. So I thought that's gonna help you a little bit. Now, We are just 25 minutes in, and okay, so I just checked the questions. My theory part is over, and now I thought I'm going to show you stuff live. That's actually what you are here for. So let's jump into the demo part. What is it I want to demo to you? So first of all, I want to show you a PowerShell script I wrote to set up your load balancer using the best practice parts we mentioned in the first thing today. And of course, before you ask the question, yes, we will share the script with you. It's free for you. You will get it, and we will share it with the presentation as well. So no panic. You will get that script if you want it. You can use it, right? No panic. There's no copyright on it, and so on. So PowerShell, I'm using PowerShell to license my load balancers and to set up the HA part and to set up all the best practices I mentioned earlier on. And then I will show you API calls using Postman. I will also go to my Ubuntu server and will show you the Restful API using Ansible. And I even have a script, a small script to create a service and add servers to it, very small, in Python. So I will show you that as well. And I hope with all of these, I give you a good intro in what you can do on automation and that is actually possible. I didn't show Terraform yet. Maybe I'm doing a webinar on that later on, but for now, let's focus on these few things as our time is limited as well. So we have half an hour time left, and let's rock and roll on that part now. So my demo. So here's my DC. Okay, 1 sec. Let's start very, very simple. So I pick you up. So this is my demo environment. I have it in VMware Cloud right now, but that doesn't matter. It works like a normal load balancer in your environment as well. So I have two brand new load balancers created, as you can see here, Kemping VLM1 and Kemping VLM2. They have never been booted. They just got deployed yesterday as a preparation for this today. So we have two networks, and I just see I made a mistake here. I want on ETH0, I want the server network, and on ETH1, I want the client network. Now that's much better. So brand new machines, not licensed. I will show you that in the console in a second. So let's start this guy. Come on. And let's check the second one as well. Hopefully I didn't make the right nice mistake there too. Come on. You see there's a bit more in this lab, but that's to a later stage. So I made the same mistake here. Oh man, I was sleeping yesterday. So client and server side, we just changed them. Great. Okay, let's power this guy on as well. So we have two load masters now. I have, of course, I have a domain controller and I have my Ubuntu server. So we get to that later to show you all of that. So IP address I can use. That should be free. Okay. Good. Now, console access to the first machine. As you see, it didn't got anything by DHCP. It's BAL and one for all. So it's really the view you have when you never ever did anything on the machine right after you deployed your OVF file. Now I will log in with BAL. And the only thing I'm manually doing is giving him an IP address so I can actually access the one. So 221, and the default gateway is 100.1. So here we go. Name server, yeah, we need that for the online licensing. So that's my domain controller, of course. And we don't need a proxy. So as you can see, completely brand new. There is a question why I do the client side on ETH1. No, you can actually choose it the way you want. The reason why I do that, I hate my clients on ETH0. The reason is by default management is on ETH0, and I always think clients have nothing to do with my management. So that's why I like to start with the server side on ETH0. But that's because I don't have a dedicated management interface here in this lab. So I put my server side on ETH0 for management purposes, and then I have my client side on ETH1. But that's just my personal preference. So I don't have to move management later on around, so that saves some administrative work for me. That's why I put client side on ETH1. But it depends now again if you have virtual or hardware units. On a hardware unit, you very likely have production on the SFP modules rather than on the copper ports. I will build 2-arm, but I will also show you 1-arm. So Thomas Love, there's another question on this. We can do, even if I have two interfaces, we can do both. And I will get to that in a minute. Let's first give those guys an IP address so I can actually show you the script first. And once we are in, I will show you the 1-arm and 2-arm part. It's interesting that you have so much questions. I like that. That's good. Come on. Here we go. For oh, interesting. He got a DHCP address, but I'm not happy with that. Cool. Okay, so we have the 221 for unit 1 and the 222 for unit 2. So let's I just write this down to make sure I don't forget. Unit 2, VLM 1. Good. Now, let's go to our domain controller. Nah, he was asleep. I was giving him too much wait time. Come on. Live demos are always interesting. So here we go. Good. So I've way too much stuff open. So let me close all of this. Yeah, you see, I'm not just using it for today. It's definitely a lab I'm using with loads of things, and I haven't been in here for a while. So there's lots I can show you, but that won't bring us anywhere today. So good. Just to show you, the load master is not licensed or anything. We are really, it's still a virgin. So here we go. That's VLM1. And you see there's a license agreement and everything. So it's definitely, yes, the script will also work for hardware. There was a question. The script, PowerShell script will also work for hardware. Yeah. I've made it for X15, so it can have 20 interfaces. So at least that's a limitation right now, but I will show you that in a second. So first unit is still not licensed, and unit 2 is the same thing. So as you see, brand new devices and completely untouched. Now, do I have PowerShell enabled? Let me double check that. It should be, but I'm double checking. Oh yeah, I have it here. So this is my script. I will go into the detail in a second. Yeah, okay. So that's the script. We get into the detail in a second. Here's the script. There we go. And there's a parameter file with it. So this script is actually made to set up not only one load balancer, you can technically set up 100,000, whatever you want. So there's a CSV file with it, and you can enter lines what you want to do. And so here in this sample now, so my first load balancer is 221 on port 443, the default gateway and the name, the NTP host and the time zone. My domain controller for DNS, the search list, and then the name. So I'm calling it now Kemping VLM1. I want to have the web user idle time to half an hour. I set that earlier. It's by default 10 minutes. So I want to set this to 1800 seconds. I want to have this in HA. So this is HA first. I want my interface ETH0 set, even though that's set already, but I'm overwriting this now. And then I can set the partner address. So as we do HA, I'm adding partner and shared address. So partner is this, and the shared is 220. Then it's asking me for the HA ID. So I want this being set to 222. And now it's asking me for ETH1 setup. So we do this IP as well. And you can add more if you see here. I can add up to ETH19. You can add all of them if you wanted to. So that's possible. Here we go. And you can set IPv6 addresses as well. I'm not doing that right now. I'm leaving them blank. So I'm taking them out. Come on, do this big. Or we can set them, it doesn't matter. And then it's asking for the name for the LDAP endpoint to create the LDAP endpoint. So I'm doing unencrypted. I have an LDAP user and a password. It's creating a group for me, LDAP group for administrative access, LM admin with root access. It's also importing a wildcard certificate and setting that up. So there is a lot in there. Yes, there's a question asked here if we can export system log files to a syslog server. Yes, you can definitely do that. I've not included that in here, but that's definitely something you can do. Yes, my certificate is located here, but that's the C on the machine I'm running. Yes. So this is the line for this load balancer, and what I'm going to do. Let me just copy this line. Here we go. And I'm pasting it in line 2 because I want to set up 2 load balancers, right? So here we go. The second one will be VLM2. And the only thing now I need to adapt is the IP addresses, of course. They need to match. Same here, but the rest is identical. Cool. Now, everything else, I should definitely consider to take the IPv6 address out, I think. Or maybe modify it here. Good. Now, happy days. So I'm saving the script parameter part. What is important? I have multiple things done. I have imported the PowerShell module. So as you can see here, Kemp Load Balancer PowerShell, these are the modules from our web page. So you need to import them first. And then using PowerShell, I did install that. So I have my, the commands is first of all, you need to enable remote signed. and then you need to import the PowerShell module. So get minus, what was it? Get minus module, and then I think it's list available. So right now it will show me the modules that I have installed. So as I used this demo before, or this machine before, I already have installed this, so I don't need to show you now how it's done. But as you can see here, I have the load balancer module already installed. So normally you would copy the file from our webpage, you would add it into the location, and then you would import that module. I have that import already done, so that's my pre-work that was already done on this machine to make this work. Now, once you have the PowerShell enabled and you have the module imported, you can run the script. And what the script is doing, it will import my CSV file with the information. I have now preset BAL password, and I make sure my BAL password remains one for all. It will ask me for a Kemp ID and for the Kemp ID password for the licensing part. I also have a version for SPLA licenses to select the right license. So that's there's possibilities there. And then it will set the host name, the NTP host, the time zone, default gateway, search list. And it will also agree to the EULA agreement and do the licensing part. It will then set, that's all licensing now. Come on, here we go. It will set my administrative parameters. It will set the web GUI interface parameters. It will set my certificate, set the HA, and also assign all the networks. So that's the best practice part that I was on about. So when we run this, as you can see, it's starting to test if it can connect to the load balancer in the first place, if it's all possible. And now it's asking me for the Kemp ID. Here we go. Oh, American keyboard. I need to, yeah. Technologies.com. Now it's asking me for the password. Don't worry, I will change it later. You won't have the fun to record this. And interesting, so I had an error. That's not so nice. Maybe because the page changed a little bit. I need to review that. Let's see if all the other parts go through. That's interesting. They have changed stuff. Come on. The new version. Sugar. I should have run this yesterday. That's the thing. When you are working and you don't do this every time. Okay, they changed the EULA agreement. That looks different than it was looking in January. So I need to see where the code has changed. Okay, fair enough. What I will do now that this failed, great, and you see you failed for the second unit as well. So what we do for now, no, it's no big deal. I will manually license, fair enough, and I will need to check where the error was. So I license this guy, and then we do the same thing to set all the parameters. Just we skip the licensing part. So 1 second, we need to improve now. Okay, so let's license him manually and then do the parameter part afterwards. I said before I will share the PowerShell script. That was the question, and the domain controller resources. What do you mean with that? Wait, now I need to change the password as well. Sure. Oh, come on. If one thing goes wrong, the whole thing goes wrong, right? Okay. So now we have licensed the load balancer, fair enough. But as you can see, hostname wise, that has already been done. So at least parts have been done. Time zone is also nice. So he did run through a few things because that's not depending on the licensing part, but he has not done the interfaces, for example. So those things didn't go through. So from that perspective, there's still some things that need to be done. Now, that part was done. The naming was done. The time server was done. So as you see, they are not depending on the licensing, but the interfaces are not done for instances. Now, that gives me the chance now to show you. So we have the API interface now enabled because we did start with PowerShell, even though it didn't do everything, but that part worked. Let's run the script once more. So I will turn this off. No, we don't accept any changes now. And we open this again. Come on. Progress Kemp script. Here we go. Yeah, come on. I changed the password because I did it manually now. Here we go. Okay, let's run that script once more. And because he is licensed, he's not asking me for that. Oh, he does. Training. Okay, I definitely need to rework this. Not sure what's going on. Fair enough. But that's live demos, right? So things don't happen the way they should be. So you see, it even started with HA setup. So it's definitely something I'm a bit annoyed now. As I said, it was working in January very fine. But as you can see, it's starting to do those things. I'm not sure where the error is right now, but we get it sorted out. Good. Even though it was not a success as I hoped, we will continue with the API part. So that's definitely something. I will look into the PowerShell script once more and fix that all. But let's show you the other parts. Now we have API enabled. We have a load balancer we can play with. So I can show you API commands. And at least we get further and be able to show you some parts today. Sugar. I'm a bit sad now, I must say. So have you set my interface now? Good. And have you rebooted? No, you haven't. Then do this now. Good boy. Okay. So we have a setup of a load balancer. Now, how can we access the API part? You can use Postman. You can use your browser, whatever you want. You can use to run API commands. It's pretty simple. To show you some, I'll just show you my local Postman now while this guy is booting. So I've played with multiple different API commands. For example, to create a virtual service, you say add VS, and then you put in the VS IP, the port, the protocol, and the name, and that will create a virtual service for you. Then the next command, add a real server to this virtual service. So pretty easy commands. You can call a backup. You can enable or disable a real server. These are lots of questions that are asked for automation. You can add a custom rule, so you can create content rules and you can add them to a server. You can request the status on a specific virtual service or statistics. So even if you have a monitoring system, you can use API calls to pull stats, right? You can use the JSON format. For example, as I said before, me show you body in JSON. So you can ping IPv6. You can list all available API calls. You can let's encrypt register in JSON format, right? So kill SSO sessions if you want. So there are multiple things you can do also on IPv6. On API 2. As I said before, everything that can be done on the web user interface, you can do via API or API version 2 as well. Okay. Now, so access. Oh, American keyboard. I never learned this in my lab. It's an American keyboard. List API. Now it will ask you for your credentials. And now it gives me all possible APIs back that I can do. And just to show this, I can now add a VS. For example, 10.0.0.250. Wow. American keyboards. It's here we go. Add VS. VS equals. Here we go. Now, the end. Cool. Port equals, let's say 80, and prod for protocol equals TCP, and then maybe we give it a nickname. So what am I using? There was a question done from Tim, so we now call it Tim's virtual service. I hope you don't mind, mate. Oh, we have not given the ETH1 interface yet. Fair enough. So he gives me the warning that it cannot be done. We can only add services to interfaces that we have IP addresses set on the load balancer. So that makes total sense. So instead, we do it now on the server network. That's fine for me as well. So now we have created a service with the name and the port and so on. And if you want to see this, let me log into the load balancer. We can directly see this live, that we now have created this service. Here we go. On this IP with this port and this protocol, we have now created Tim's service. Good. So that was just API, and I'm a bit concerned about the time, so I wanted to show you some other things as well. That's why I'm moving on quickly, if you don't mind. So I have an Ubuntu server. I did install Ansible and all the modules to it, and now I'm a bit time concerned, so that's why I'm not going into big detail on this, but I have a YAML playbook here for Ansible. And we can now say we want to create a new service. We want to work with this. So what I'm doing is we go now to our brand new load balancer we just deployed, right? So that was our machine. The password has now changed. We want to create a new service, 205, Ansible API, port 80. We can also do port 443. That's totally fine. And we want to add servers to it. So the issue now, as we don't have ETH1 set, so maybe I manually do this quickly in order for us to be able to show this as well. Do I have a browser? Yeah. Instead of moving to the domain controller now, confusing you all, I want to connect from here. So HTTPS 192.168.100.220. So this is our load balancer right now, the brand new one we have created today, or set up more or less today. Come on. Let's give him some IP addresses on ETH1. I wanted to show you the two-arm part as well, so that's why I think it makes sense to add this now. So normally that's done by the PowerShell script, so please bear with me on that. Sorry for that. That's the thing, huh? Old scripts, if they change something in the code, your old script might be useless. You need to redo it, but that's always the joy of it. So now we have an interface. So we can create this service. It will be called Ansible API. It will add a real server behind. So all of that's fine. Maybe I'm not doing it on 443. A reason for that is I have not involved now one that will enable SSL offloading. So from that perspective, so Ansible is able to run API calls. So here you see I'm putting in user : password at loadmaster and then loadmaster port if there's a different port needed. And then I create a service, I add a real server, and I add a second real server. So this is what this script is doing. And we can now run our Ansible playbook and just create everything according to that playbook. So that was Ansible for us now live. And we now have on our load balancer a service. Here we go, with Ansible API and our two real servers behind. And now, just to show you this, the servers are on ETH0, whereby the service is on ETH1. So this is a proper two-arm setup. If I would have the IP here on the 192.168, then it's a one-arm, even though the second network is created. If my VIP address is in the same network as the target server, then it's one arm. If the VIP is in a different network than the target server, then it's two arm, right? So it's that simple. And we can easily now, just to show you that it's, of course, it's working, we can now access this page and it will show us the answer on the server and the backend, or at least it should. Have I a firewall in between? Oh, of course not. That Ubuntu server right now is not in that client network, so he can't go there. So let's go to the domain controller. He can definitely. One sec. That was me being funny again. So my domain.
Renard, we are a little bit over time.
I will
Just wanted
finish.
to let
I
you
will
know.
finish in a second. I'm nearly there. I just wanted to show something as well to make sure we finish it completely. We started a bit late,
No
so
problem.
bear with me.
That's true. That's true.
So as you see in the client network, I'm now accessing my load balancer VIP, and the load balancer is going from his interface to my destination server, so that my server is having a PHP behind telling me who was the client. So the load balancer is now the client, and you see the original host that was entered. So my VIP is definitely working, and I have created that with Ansible. So cool. And now, having that done, I also have a little Python script. Now let's open this. It will do the same thing. It will create a service. So let me just enter my IP in here. Hopefully that will run as well. If I remember the code properly. 24. And I need BAL because I have not created any API user. And it should create the same thing I did with Ansible now. It would now be done with Python. So save. Where's my save? Here we go. Save. So let's see. That should work. Okay. Yes. So create vs.py. I'm not too sure. I haven't done this for a while. Not too sure if I need to run another command. Yeah, what was the Python command? Python, American keyboard, Python. Okay, it's too late now. The time is gone. But if I would run that Python command now, I'm not doing it on regular base. If I would run that Python command properly now, maybe you have an idea how it's run. /script. No, Python doesn't work that way. Anyway, if I would run that, it would create those things as well. Just to show you once more, it's the same thing, and it would work. It has now commands like what you see in PowerShell, create real server and so on. So that's just a different name, a different language and so on, but it would do the same thing. I definitely record this once more and put it online, so maybe that helps in an own video rather than a webinar. So sorry for the things that didn't work, but that's the way in live demos. So I promise it will be better in the next webinar. So now, because we are limited in time, thank you very much for participating.